a town where the ground has been burning underfoot for 60 years. A place where Wi-Fi is against the law. And an entire settlement that turned into a cemetery. America isn't just about New York and Los Angeles. It's hundreds of towns you've probably never heard of, but should have. In some places, they sell air for money. In others, it's completely forbidden to live at all. Today, 50 facts that will change everything you thought was normal. Let's open up the map and dive into a world of the most incredible discoveries. 50 surprising facts about American cities. In New York, you can sell air. No, this isn't a joke. Just imagine, you're a developer in Manhattan, and you're allowed to construct a building with a total area of 70,000 square meters. That's about 35 stories. But let's say you want 60 stories instead. Then you can buy development rights from neighboring buildings. For example, if one nearby building only takes up to 45,000 square meters, then 25,000 square meters are unused air rights. You buy those meters, add them to your limit, and now you can build a 60-story tower. This is how you're buying air from others. Sounds like a scam, but it's completely legal. But of course, New York isn't the only place with unconventional building rules. In Greensburg, municipal buildings are constructed to the highest environmental standards. However, this decision wasn't born out of comfort, it came from tragedy. On May 4, 2007, a tornado nearly wiped Greensburg, Kansas off the map. Once the shock passed, the residents looked at the ruins of their hometown and made a fateful decision, not just to rebuild Greensburg, but to make it better than before. In December 2007, the City Council passed a resolution. All municipal buildings in Greensburg must meet the highest eco-certification, LEED Platinum. This also means buildings are constructed mostly from recycled materials. They're powered by renewable energy. In Greensburg's case, wind farms. Furthermore, they feature systems that reduce electricity and water consumption. Now, Greensburg is known as the greenest city in America, and it's thriving again, which you can't quite say about our next location. More than 1 million people are buried in Colma. This California town, located just 8 miles south of San Francisco, is literally steeped in death. Here, the dead outnumber the living by far. Colma has 17 separate cemeteries that are the final resting place of over 1.5 million people. For comparison, the town's population is just about 1,500 people. That's 1,000 deceased for every living resident. But how did that happen? Was it war? A plague? A natural disaster? Actually, the story is even more intriguing. Most of Colma's deceased aren't locals. They were kind of relocated from neighboring San Francisco. You see, land prices skyrocketed there in the early 1900s. San Francisco quickly shut down most of its cemeteries and, by official order, had the remains relocated to Colma. Now, 73% of this town's land is taken up by cemeteries. Yes, millions were laid to rest beneath Colma, but what lies beneath the next city is a real threat. Some neighborhoods in St. Louis are built near radioactive waste. Back in the 1940s, during the U.S. development of the atomic bomb, uranium was processed right within the city of St. Louis, Missouri, and a nearby area became a dumping ground for radioactive waste. Later, cleanup efforts were carried out, and seemingly successfully, until people began to get sick. A lot of people. Far too many. Imagine, nearly 3,000 cancer cases just in North St. Louis alone. It turned out the soil there was 3 times more radioactive than the legal limit, right beneath people's feet. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is responsible for the cleanup, but progress is painfully slow. They say it won't be finished before 2038. Meanwhile, residents are fighting to hold the government accountable for decades of radiation exposure and negligence. Yes, some cities suffer the long-term consequences of radiation. Others, in contrast, become shining examples of sustainability. 56% of Nashville is forested. That's over 170,000 acres of forest. It's practically a national park of its own. And it's not just local tree species. In Nashville, you'll also find exotics like magnolias and cherry blossoms. In fact, Nashville hosts an annual cherry blossom festival each spring. Forests mean fresh air and natural beauty, but there's a downside. It can ignite like a match, just like it did in California. The town of Paradise turned to ashes in just a few hours. Picture this. It's 2018, and one of the deadliest wildfires in California history is raging. That morning, the fire reached the little town with a sign that read, "Welcome to Paradise." Hurricane-force winds reaching 70 miles per hour drove a wall of flames straight into the town, giving it no chance. The most terrifying part was that the fire engulfed the town so quickly it cut off escape routes. There were traffic jams. People were trapped in their cars, surrounded by flames, unable to flee. That day, 85 people in total lost their lives. Within hours, Paradise was reduced to smoking ruins. The tragedy shocked the entire nation. Such catastrophes often force us to rethink how we design and build our cities, and some already try to take some actions. Babcock Ranch is the first city in the US powered entirely by solar energy. Since 2009, Kitson and Partners and Florida Power and Light have been building a town here that runs 100% on solar power. Streets and homes draw electricity from a vast solar panel field, and each rooftop is designed to be its own miniature power plant. The result? Babcock Ranch produces more electricity than it consumes. It's also Florida's first hurricane-resilient city. During Hurricane Ian in 2022, the power never went out. It's truly a city of the future. But there's another experimental settlement in Arizona that's trying to outshine it. Arcosanti was built according to the arcology principles. What does that mean? The term was coined by architect Paolo Soleri, who just put the words architecture and ecology together. In practice, it means designing structures that are as environmentally friendly as possible, while using minimal resources. The result is a highly unusual center that's still being constructed. Originally, Arcosanti was designed to have 5,000 residents. The last of its 13 buildings was completed in 1989. Today, the permanent population ranges from 50 to 150 people, mostly students and volunteers. The town survives largely through tourism, welcoming up to 40,000 visitors a year. Its main source of income is handcrafted bells cast on site. Overall, this settlement is stable and quite predictable, which can't be said about Texas's largest settlement. Houston is the only major city in the US without zoning laws. In simple terms, you can build almost anything, almost anywhere, even a nightclub next to a kindergarten. The issue of zoning in Houston has come up for public vote several times, but each time the proposal was rejected. Why? Because of fears that zoning would cause property prices to skyrocket in certain areas. As a result, Houston remains a city without construction regulations. This poses a risk to infrastructure. But problems like this are still quite manageable. But how about a place where gadgets are banned altogether? Mobile phones and Wi-Fi are banned in Green Bank. No, this isn't about conspiracy. The thing is, this small town in West Virginia is home to the world's largest fully steerable radio telescope, the Robert C. Byrd Green Bank Telescope. Construction began in 1994, and since then, the telescope has made many scientific discoveries. It helped discover the most massive neutron star ever observed, and even detected a helical magnetic field in the Orion Nebula. But to feel the faintest signals from deep space, the telescope requires absolute radio silence. Even ordinary Wi-Fi or cell phone can interfere and drown out the signal from a distant star or planet. That's why there's a strict radio quiet zone for several miles around the telescope. Wireless devices, microwave ovens, and anything that emits radio waves are prohibited. That's why Green Bank is often called the quietest town in America. About 250 people live here today. The town also attracts individuals who believe they suffer from electromagnetic hypersensitivity, and they're seeking refuge from waves that are nearly everywhere else. Others, meanwhile, may not even know they're living right on top of toxic waste, like in this city in New York State. Niagara Falls was home to a toxic waste disposal site. 10 years after it was decommissioned, the land was handed over to the city, and what the city did next is unthinkable by today's standards. They built an entire residential neighborhood and a school on top of the landfill. By the 1970s, the truth came to light. and residents began finding chemical residues in their yards. Worst of all, many of them fell ill. Thanks to the efforts of local activists, the unfortunate neighborhood was finally evacuated by 1982. Today, the former landfill has been cleaned and neutralized, though pockets of contamination still appear. But no one can escape what's happening in the next town. An underground fire has been raging in Centralia for over 60 years. This is a small Pennsylvania town that thrives on anthracite coal mining, or rather, it used to. The very coal deposits that once fueled Centralia's economy eventually turned it into a ghost town. However, back in 1962, no one imagined that a routine task assigned by local authorities would lead to such devastation. It all started innocently enough. The town landfill had accumulated too much trash, and the fire department was instructed to get rid of it. Following standard practice at the time, the firefighters set the refuse alight, without realizing that just below the garbage lay rich veins of anthracite coal. The inevitable happened. The coal caught fire. No matter what they tried, the landfill fire couldn't be extinguished. Meanwhile, the underground blaze kept spreading, and yet people continued living in the town, despite the sinkholes and smoke occasionally rising from the ground. It wasn't until 1983 that the state officially declared it a disaster and began relocating residents. No one knows how many centuries it will take for the fire to burn through over 160 hectares of coal underground. Here, the authorities were powerless against an underground catastrophe. In the next location, however, power was handed over to a company known for controlling everything down to the smallest detail. Reedy Creek in Florida was controlled by Disney, and it lasted for more than 50 years. In 1967, the Reedy Creek Improvement District was established to give Disney full autonomy over the land that would become Disney World. The company was granted sweeping powers. It could set building codes, manage roads and utilities, and even run its own fire department. In theory, Disney could have even built a nuclear power plant or its own airport here. The district was funded by taxes and bonds paid by Disney itself. This level of corporate self-governance lasted more than 5 decades. But in 2022, following a public clash between Disney and Florida officials, Governor Ron DeSantis managed to have those powers revoked. By 2023, the district had been renamed to Central Florida Tourism Oversight District and placed under state control. Disney lost its jurisdiction over the land. However, the district still stands, alive and functional. In the next location, however, there may soon be nothing left to govern. The city of Gary, Indiana is almost half abandoned, and yet it once thrived. In 1906, the Gary Works steel mill opened here, and was then the largest one in the world. It powered the city's growth, providing thousands of jobs. But in the 1970s, a fateful shift occurred that turned a once big industrial hub into a stagnant city. The US began importing steel from abroad. The plant shrank, thousands lost their jobs and moved away. But if Gary struggles with a vanishing population, the next city faces a very different challenge, one of overcrowding. Los Angeles has the longest traffic jams in the US. Getting stuck in a standstill on the way to work is an everyday occurrence for locals. This city has the worst traffic in the country. Over the past 7 years, road congestion has increased by another 10%. Drivers nostalgically recall 2013, when they had to sit in traffic for just 64 hours a year, compared to 89 hours now. But why is this happening? What's slowing down the City of Angels? The simplest answer is the sheer number of cars. What roads can handle roughly 7 million vehicles? Cars overload the highways. For example, Highway 405 is constantly jammed, and the city itself is built in such a way that living without a personal vehicle is nearly impossible. But the next town doesn't have these problems. It's tiny, but also extreme in its own way. Fairbanks has the greatest temperature swings in the United States. In this Alaskan city, winter temperatures can drop as low as -50 degrees Celsius. But summer brings its own surprises. Temperatures can reach plus 30 degrees Celsius, which is quite unusual for Alaska. How the locals have adapted to such extreme shifts remains a mystery. The next city, however, is warm all the time, at least underground. Hot Springs, Arkansas has more than 40 thermal springs. Every day, over 500,000 gallons of water gush out from them. That's roughly 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools. of entirely natural geothermal springs. At the base of Hot Springs Mountain, people have long sought healing. Back in the 19th century, visitors came here for treatment. At that time, the city had 20 bathhouses, what we'd now call spas. Today, only 2 bathhouses remain open. The rest shut down due to environmental concerns or simply drying up. Still, Hot Springs remains a popular destination. The next town, however, isn't the place for relaxation. Boise, Idaho experiences a rare inversion phenomenon. Sometimes the city itself is shrouded in fog and smog, while the surrounding mountains bask in sunshine. Why does this happen? It all comes down to its unique location. Normally, the closer you are to the ground, the warmer it is. The higher you go, the colder it gets. But during a temperature inversion, the opposite occurs. Warm air gets trapped above the valley, while cold air, along with fog and smog, settles below. The surrounding mountains contribute to this, acting like a lid that seals everything in. The longer the inversion lasts, the worse Boise's air quality becomes. Exhaust fumes and other pollutants have nowhere to escape from the valley. The residents of Boise certainly deal with the downsides of their natural terrain. But in the next Florida town, the ground itself poses a constant threat to the people living there. In Seffner, you can get swallowed by a sinkhole. What exactly does that mean? Imagine sleeping peacefully in your bed and suddenly the ground beneath you collapses and you fall down to the void. It sounds like something from a horror movie, but that's exactly what happened in 2013 to Seffner resident Jeff Bush. And what's worse, his body was never found. The man was taken by a sinkhole that formed beneath his home. The thing is that Seffner sits on limestone, a soft porous rock that groundwater often erodes. As underground cavities form, the surface above can suddenly cave in, creating a sinkhole. Unfortunately, this happens without warning, leaving residents to hope that there are no hidden voids beneath their homes. By the way, one of America's largest cities is also sinking. Not as suddenly, but just as inevitably. Let's head to Texas. The metropolis of Houston is sinking lower and lower. In some places, the city has dropped by as much as 10 feet from its original elevation. There are several causes behind this process. Empty spaces are left behind when water, oil, or gas is pumped out of the ground beneath the city. These voids eventually collapse under the weight of the soil above. The ground compacts, the surface sinks, and the city lowers. But is this really a serious issue? For Houston, a city already plagued by storms and flooding, it absolutely is. The lower the elevation, the easier it is to flood. Only a shift towards sustainable, environmentally mindful resource extraction could change this trend. However, just 150 miles west of Houston, the landscape tells a different story. Austin, Texas is located on a geological boundary between 2 regions. Here, you don't need a compass to tell which direction you're facing. The terrain varies dramatically in different parts of the city. In the northeast, it's flat plains with clay soil. In the southwest, on the other hand, there are hills mostly made of limestone with a thin layer of soil on top. Why such a contrast? It all stems from the Balcones Fault, an ancient geological scar. Millions of years ago, tectonic plates collided here, pushing a section of land upward. As a result, half of Austin now sits atop the remains of a long-gone mountain range. Due to this unusual topography, the flat part of the city is prone to flooding during heavy rains. To prevent this, a special dam system was built on the Colorado River. The next city also stands out for its unique location. Denver, Colorado sits at an elevation of 1 mile above sea level. This is exactly where the nickname Mile High City comes from. Such an unusual location affects both Denver's climate and the health of its residents. The air is dry and thinner with less oxygen. Visitors often experience shortness of breath at first, and some may even develop symptoms of altitude sickness. Despite these challenges, Denver ranks 19th in population among U.S. cities, and it's the 5th most populous state capital. Its scale is impressive. But the next city, although much smaller, became famous for a law that sounds like a joke at first glance. But it's not. In Gainesville, Georgia, eating fried chicken with a fork is a crime. The city is known as the poultry capital of the world, thanks to its billion-dollar chicken industry. And yes, it has an official ordinance from 1961 stating that fried chicken must be eaten with your hands. Why? probably because it tastes better that way. In any case, no one has ever been arrested for violating the law. Except once, in 2009, when a 91-year-old Jenny Dietrich from Louisiana was jokingly arrested on her birthday for using a fork while visiting Gainesville. Fortunately, the mayor was present and immediately pardoned her. Gainesville's chicken law is largely symbolic, but in another city in Virginia, breaking an unusual law can lead to a real punishment. In Chesapeake, anyone over 14 is not allowed to trick or treat. Additionally, it's illegal to collect or hand out candy after 8 p.m. Violators can be fined up to $250. If it seems strict, consider this. Until 2019, the age limit was 12, and the penalties included arrest or even jail time. These rules were established by a 1970 ordinance passed after a 1968 Halloween incident when teenagers caused trouble by throwing firecrackers into candy bags and baskets. The law applies to all cities in the Hampton Roads region, including Chesapeake. And since no one has been arrested in the past 49 years, it seems to work well. Another city also enforces a seemingly strange law, but this time, it makes perfect sense. In New York City, it's prohibited to shake a mop out of a window. Back in the 1940s, Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia received numerous complaints from residents concerned about neighbors shaking out dusty mops and rugs directly from their windows. One letter dated 1944 described how dust from a mop ruined freshly painted window frames next door. In response, the city tasked the Department of Health with investigating the issue. This led to a ban on shaking out mops, rugs, and vacuum bags from windows, which was later codified in the city's sanitary code. Essentially, this law fits well within New York's broader anti-littering efforts. After all, shaking a mop out of a window can scatter dust and dirt into pedestrians below, and dirty the street or sidewalk. And if someone happens to be leaning out of a lower window at that moment, they won't be too happy either, to say the least. Meanwhile, another city in New Jersey enforces one of the strictest commercial regulations in the country. The town of Paramus enforces some of the strictest blue laws in the country. Yes, these are laws that restrict or prohibit certain or all commercial activities on specific days, typically Sundays. In cities where blue laws are in effect, you can't buy or sell most items on those days. The intent is to ensure that working people have time to rest. Interestingly, no one knows for sure why they're called blue laws. One theory suggests that blue once symbolized strictness and firm adherence to harsh rules. Today, most blue laws across the US have been repealed. But in Paramus, most forms of retail activity are still banned on Sundays. The question why they're called blue laws is almost as puzzling as the age-old joke, why did the chicken cross the road? But the next city in Georgia provides a clear answer to that one. In Quitman, it's illegal for chickens to cross the road. More precisely, there's an official law stating that chicken owners must keep their birds under control and away from the streets. Chapter 8 of the City Code of Quitman states, "It shall be unlawful for any person owning or controlling chickens, ducks, geese, or any other domestic fowl to allow the same to run at large upon the streets or alleys of the city." So in Quitman, the famous chicken joke has a definitive punchline. Why did the chicken cross the road? To get fined. And in one California city, even people aren't allowed to cross the road, but only while wearing a special kind of shoes. In Carmel by the Sea, wearing high heels is prohibited, at least without a special permit. Why would a city need such an unusual restriction? By 1963, the city attorney had grown tired of dealing with endless injury claims related to foot accidents. The thing is, the sidewalks in Carmel by the Sea are quite uneven, with cypress and pine tree roots often pushing up through the pavement. People wearing high heels were frequently getting hurt and filing lawsuits against the city. The solution was pretty unusual. No, they didn't replace the sidewalks. They simply banned high heels. Well, not entirely. You can wear high heels, but only if you obtain an official permit from City Hall. It's free, issued in your name, and signed by a city clerk on duty. The law banning heels is just a safeguard, so you can't sue the city. Many visitors even get the permit as a souvenir, even if they don't plan to wear heels. An interesting solution by the city authorities. Now imagine what kind of laws they'd have if the mayor were a cat. Sounds too much out there? Not in Alaska. The town of Talkeetna once elected a cat as its mayor. In 1997, the candidate pool for mayor didn't satisfy most residents. So, as a joke, one resident submitted her tailless cat as a write-in candidate. The cat's name was Stubbs, and the entire town voted for him unanimously. Stubbs became the honorary mayor with his mayoral office located inside the local Nagley's General Store. The furry mayor became a beloved local celebrity and helped draw tourists to the town. In 2012, he was even re-elected for the same role. Sadly, Stubbs passed away in 2017. One might wonder, could he officiate weddings? Even if not, the locals could always head to Nevada for that. In Las Vegas, you can get married at any time of day or night. Yes, it's not just the city of casinos, but also a paradise for lovers. The excuse, let's sleep on it, everything's closed at night anyway, doesn't work here. Las Vegas has wedding chapels that operate 24/7, 365 days a year. No holidays, no breaks. So if you suddenly feel the urge to tie the knot in the middle of the night on a public holiday, nothing is holding you back. And if the constant buzz and grand scale of Vegas starts to feel overwhelming, you can always head to a much quieter little town in Wyoming for contrast. Buford, Wyoming is the smallest town in the United States. Its total area is just 0.04 square kilometers, and for many years it had a population of just one person. Don Salmons moved with his wife Terry from Los Angeles to the Buford area in 1980. After his wife passed away and his son moved out, Don became the town's sole resident. He wore many hats: janitor, gas station attendant, shopkeeper, and even mayor. When Don decided to move to Colorado to be closer to his son, the town was put up for auction in 2012. The lot included over 10 acres of land, a convenience store, a gas station, and a modular home in southwest Wyoming. The auction lasted just 11 minutes and sparked global attention. In the end, the town was sold for $900,000 to anonymous buyers from Vietnam. Buford's story sounds almost like a parable about one man and an entire town. And in the next small Pennsylvania town, the main character isn't a man at all. It's a small rodent. A weather-predicting groundhog is living in Punxsutawney. Even if you don't celebrate Groundhog Day, chances are you've heard of Punxsutawney Phil. Every year, on February 2nd, Phil predicts how soon spring will arrive. According to folklore, if the groundhog sees its shadow and retreats back into his burrow, winter will be long. If not, spring and warmth are just around the corner. The tradition has roots in pagan beliefs, and the first official reference to the weather forecasting groundhog dates back to 1841. Locals insist that Phil is the same groundhog each year. Either way, the Groundhog Club adds to Punxsutawney's popularity. After a prophetic groundhog, what could possibly surprise you next? How about a library in Washington State where nobody reads? Yes, there's a tool library in Seattle. What if you need a drill, or hammer, or an ice cream maker? Instead of buying tools you'll probably only use a few times, you can simply borrow them. Since 2009, Seattle has hosted a tool library in West Seattle, with another one opening in Northeast Seattle in 2012. You can not only borrow tools, but also attend workshops and hands-on classes there. One city teaches you how to drill and repair, another teaches you how to say goodbye, with orchestra music and street dancing. In New Orleans, Louisiana, jazz funerals are a thing. More precisely, funerals are accompanied by a brass band, which sometimes plays jazz. These jazz funerals have been part of New Orleans culture since the early 20th century. The custom has roots in African rituals and colonial military band marches. The band accompanies the deceased to the cemetery and continues playing after the burial. At that point, passers-by often join in, dancing in what's known locally as the second line. Some believe music helps guide the soul. Meanwhile, in New Mexico, some believe in aliens, and they've turned that belief into business. In Roswell, New Mexico, UFOs are a key part of the economy. It all began in the summer of 1947, when a UFO allegedly crashed on the outskirts of Roswell. The military from the Roswell Air Base quickly collected its wreckage. The very next day, however, they announced that it was just a weather balloon. But that incident gave Roswell its claim to fame, and the town has leaned into it ever since. One of the 3 McDonald's locations there is even built in the shape of a flying saucer. And of course, Roswell is home to the International UFO Museum, dedicated to the very same 1947 incident. We may never know what exactly happened back then, but one thing remains clear: the aliens are a good thing for Roswell's economy. In the next town, however, it's not extraterrestrials, but a dazzling, lively event that keeps the economy going. Mobile is home to the oldest carnival in the United States. It's called Mardi Gras, which translates as Fat Tuesday, and was first celebrated in 1703. At the time, Mobile, now in Alabama, was the capital of French Louisiana. The carnival itself originated as a French Catholic tradition. It marks the day before the start of Lent. Today, Mardi Gras kicks off with November parties, the International Carnival Ball, and the Camellia Ball. Parades and masked processions take place every evening leading up to Mardi Gras. The parades feature members of various exclusive mobile societies, like the Order of St. Louis or the Knights of Revelry. Wearing masks and riding on floats or horses, they toss trinkets and sweets into the crowd. The final parade in Mobile is traditionally hosted by the Order of Myths, the city's oldest mystical society. Now, the next city in Georgia has its own kind of mystery. Dozens of streets with nearly the same name. In Atlanta, more than 70 streets include Peachtree in their names. A long time ago, this area was home to a Creek tribe settlement called Standing Peachtree, located at a creek with an even older name. Before that, Cherokee Indians lived there in a village called Pakanuhuili, which translates to Standing Peachtree. However, some historians argue the translation is incorrect. The name may have referred not to a peach tree, but to a pitch tree, meaning a resinous tree or a pine. Either way, it's easy to get lost in Atlanta, whether among pine trees or peach trees. When someone in the city says Peachtree without specifying, they usually mean Peachtree Street, the main north-south artery running through downtown, midtown, and Buckhead. Just don't confuse it with West Peachtree Street, which runs parallel to Peachtree Street and is a major route going through the city center. And now we head to another place where it's easy to get lost, not among trees, but among bridges. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania has 446 bridges. It's no wonder it's nicknamed the City of Bridges. The city sits at the confluence of 3 rivers, the Allegheny, the Monongahela, and the Ohio. Without bridges, Pittsburgh would simply be a scattered patchwork of land surrounded by water. The city's first river bridges were wooden. They opened in 1818 on Smithfield Street and in 1819 on 6th Street. The oldest functioning bridge in the city is the Smithfield Street Bridge, opened in 1883. In Pittsburgh, it's nearly impossible to drive more than a mile without crossing a bridge. Meanwhile, in Illinois' most populous city, you can drive for more than 20 miles straight and stay on the same street the entire time. Chicago is home to the longest city street in the United States. It's called Western Avenue. It's not a highway or an expressway. It's a regular residential street with standard urban infrastructure. It's just very, very long. Western Avenue runs 24 miles through Chicago from north to south. And it doesn't stop at the city limits. It continues another 26 miles southward, all the way to the Will-Kankakee County line. In some parts of the country, we can see miles of paved roads. In others, snow-covered trails. And on those snowy tracks, you'll find antlered athletes. Anchorage, Alaska is home to an annual reindeer race. At first glance, this event somewhat resembles the Spanish running of the bulls in Pamplona, where people dash through narrow streets ahead of a stampede. But in Anchorage, it's not bulls, but reindeer sprinting alongside people through the snowy streets. This quirky race is part of the winter festival known as Furrondi. Unlike bulls, reindeer are pretty mellow animals. So far, no one has been hurt during the run. But it's still a wild sight to behold. Anchorage takes pride in its unique races. Meanwhile, a town in Massachusetts is proud of something completely different. Thousands of empty jars. East Taunton Street has a beer can museum. In November 2013, it was listed among America's strangest museums. The museum houses more than 5,000 exhibits. Beyond the cans themselves, visitors can find the most unexpected items made from them. clothing, radios, and even art installations. There's also an entire library dedicated to beer cans and brewing in general. The oldest exhibit is a Kruger ale can from the 1930s, a true old-school piece. All this treasure was collected in 1978 by Kevin Logan, who also serves as the museum's director and curator. Though it's a private collection, tours are available by appointment. Yep, in some places, people spend decades collecting cans, and elsewhere, they never even got around to naming their town. In the state of Colorado, there's a settlement called No Name. Life probably isn't easy for locals. Imagine trying to place an order for delivery to No Name, or being asked where you live and having to reply, No Name. And it's the truth. But where did such a strange name come from? According to the official theory, it's named after the nearby No Name Creek and No Name Canyon. But there are more extravagant legends as well. One suggests that during a census, all the residents simply wrote No Name on their forms. Another theory claims a highway engineer labeled the nearest I-70 exit as No Name, and the name just stuck. Attempts to rename it were met with opposition from locals. So Colorado has a town with no name. Meanwhile, in another state, there's a settlement whose name is a question in itself. There's a town in Arizona called Y. Its name came from a quirk in the law. Originally, the town was going to be named with a single letter, Y. And that made perfect sense. Two state highways, 85 and 86, intersected there in the shape of the letter Y. But there was a catch. State law required town names to contain at least 3 letters. So the founders kept the idea short but meaningful, and the town came to be known as Y. Sometimes strange names are just a clever play on words. Other times, they're based on someone's last name, which can sound amusing, or not. There's a town in Oregon called Boring. It was named after William Boring, one of its early settlers. The name turned out to be rather fitting. It practically begged to become a meme. And eventually, someone came up with an idea to make the American town of Boring a sister city to the Scottish village of Dole. In 2012, that idea became reality. It seems the place embraced its boring identity with a sense of humor, but some places go all in just to seem more interesting, even at the cost of changing the town's name, and there's a great example in New Mexico. The city of Truth or Consequences is named after a radio show. In 1916, a resort town called Hot Springs developed here, with hot thermal waters, tranquility, and a steady stream of tourists. But everything changed 34 years later. In 1950, the host of the Truth or Consequences radio program announced a nationwide contest. He promised that the show's 10th anniversary would be a broadcast live from the first town to rename itself after the program. And Hot Springs took the challenge. The thermal springs took a back seat. The name became the town's new claim to fame. The city officially adopted the name Truth or Consequences, and in 1950, the show really did air from there. The host continued visiting the town every year for the next 50 years. In this case, the change was voluntary, but in other places, it's born of conflict, with unexpected ending. There's a town in Texas with a fierce name, Cut and Shoot. It sounds intense, but the story behind it is surprisingly calm. In 1912, a dispute broke out among the townspeople. The exact cause is unclear. Some say it was about the design of the church's new steeple. Others say church members were arguing over land claims. Then a young boy suddenly stepped into the conflict and ended up making history. He declared that he was scared and then reportedly declared, "I'm going to cut around the corner and shoot through the bushes in a minute." The tension eased, and the town people came to be known by the boy's memorable words, "Cut and shoot." After such drama, some might long for peace and quiet. Ideally, nothing at all. And here it is. Right there on the map, there's a settlement in Arizona called Nothing. And yes, strangely enough, nothing really happens in Nothing anymore. No one lives there now. Although things were a little different once, it all started in 1977 when a man named Richard Kenworth set up a gas station on the highway between Las Vegas and Phoenix. At its peak, the settlement had a whopping 4 residents, practically a metropolis. No streets, no houses, no town hall. Just a gas station and a roadside shop in the middle of the desert. The sign at the entrance read, "The staunch citizens of nothing are full of hope, faith, and believe in the work ethic." Through the years, these dedicated people had faith in nothing, hoped for nothing, worked at nothing, for nothing. Inspiring, isn't it? But in 2005, when its founder left the place, nothing officially became a ghost town. Now there's just silence, dust, and nothing. And after nothing, naturally comes hell, but not the one you're thinking of. There's a town in Michigan called Hell, but who would name a town like that? Well, there are a few theories. One says it's the Germans' fault. Travelers passed by and exclaimed, "So schön hell," which actually means "so bright and beautiful" in German. Another theory is more straightforward. The place was so hot and hellish that no other name seemed more fitting. According to the third theory, when the town's founder, George Reeves, was asked what to name the place, he said, "I don't care, you can call it Hell if you want to." Whatever the truth, since 1841, Hell has been a real place on the map, and naturally, the name became a tourist magnet. So yeah, Hell on Earth literally exists. And the next location, its name is no less grim. There's a town in Arizona called Tombstone. So where did this bleak name come from? Its founder, Ed Schieffelin, was searching for silver on these lands. When his friend learned what Schieffelin was up to, he's quoted as telling him, "The only rock you'll find out there will be your own tombstone." But instead, he discovered one of the richest silver deposits in the region, and the town quickly became a symbol of the Wild West. The famous event here was the 1881 gunfight between Sheriff Wyatt Earp and the Cowboys Gang. In just 30 seconds, 3 people were killed, and the town forever entered history as the symbol of the Wild West. Tombstone is like a window into America's past. And what about this next place? It hasn't even been built yet, but it promises to be the future. Billionaire Mark Lowry wants to build a city of the future. It's called Tolosa, a beautiful word and a symbolic one. In Greek, it means purpose. And what they've envisioned isn't just a new city, it's nearly a utopia. The core idea is a new system. People build the city and share in the profits it generates. Yes, it sounds utopian, but there is a master plan. With a massive skyscraper, universal public transit, and all the necessary infrastructure. However, construction hasn't even started. They haven't even chosen a location yet. The plan is to build Tolosa somewhere in the desert, perhaps in Texas. The plan is for a megacity of 5 million people. Just a little ambitious, right? But for now, it all exists only in the mind of a billionaire.